Pronto, FP1 Will? Sbinalla.
God, that brings me back to the end of the world. We're but a week on from the hissy fits of Budapest, and now F1 finds itself in the home of God's piss as it heads to Spa-Francorchamps, the summer break, and for me, a f***ing holiday at last. We've got a lot to get into this weekend, so if you end up enjoying the video, be sure to drop it a like and get subscribed. Also, before we begin, I want to say a big thank you to everyone who went and followed the photography Insta over the last few days. Okay, it wasn't really a thank you, just another reason to plug it again, but with that out of the way, let's get into the comedy review. It's the 2024 Belgian Grand Prix. We'll start off with the news with the breaking story that no one saw coming whatsoever. Esteban Ocon has signed for Haas in 2025. Honestly, I don't know about you, but I was certain they were handing that seat to the vegetable here. Completely caught me off guard. In reality, a bit like the second plane, we all saw this one coming. I even made a video about it, so go look at that after this one. Also in the news, we've got to cover the fallout from Max Verstappen's latest meltdown after he stayed up past his bedtime in Budapest and subsequently dipped offline as he piled into the side of Lewis Hamilton. Max claims the team haven't banned him from his 3 AM gaming sessions, threatening to go to the tote bag instead and leaving them with this lump of dead skin. The Dutchman spent the Hungarian Grand Prix weekends rather angry over the team radio, and the FIA have now attempted the crackdown on swearing, which, yeah, good luck with that one, you bunch of Finally, let's get to what the hell Audi are playing at. After a reported power struggle between their bosses, saw the German manufacturer resolve the issue by just sacking both of them. As a replacement, the team have drafted in Mushroom Man, giving him both roles, which sounds a little bit similar to what he had at Ferrari, just before he turned them into a glorified meme. The move also appears to confirm that the team are no longer pursuing Carlos Sainz for 2025, as the Spaniard has surely suffered enough under the rule of Super Mario here. So hopefully that's offended enough people by now, and if you're still here, well done. Now let's get on to first practice. That would kick off with Max Verstappen and Yuki Tsunoda finding out they get new power units, and thus grid penalties since they're now over their allocation. But hats off to Tsunoda for remembering the FIA swear jar rule this weekend.
In total, I think it's 60 places grid drop for you this weekend.
Oh, Jesus.
That penalty now means Sergio Perez will have to take the fight to the front runners this weekend. That's not happening, is it? It's now heavily rumoured that Daniel Ricciardo could take up that second Red Bull seat from the Dutch Grand Prix onwards, but if you ask me, the Honey Badger isn't giving that away whatsoever. Danny's grin was in fact so big it obscured his vision when he had a clumsy spin early into FP1. He thankfully kept his RB out of the wall, and I guess it could always be worse. You could be driving an Alpine. The French team continued their now yearly tradition of sacking its team principal at the Belgian Grand Prix, and also rolled out a Deadpool-inspired livery. It's quite fitting, actually, a cinematic universe we haven't given a shit about since 2020, sponsoring an F1 team we haven't given a shit about since 2020. Esteban Ocon was allowed to show this off for a grand total of 1 lap in FP1 before his car pissed itself and confined into the garage for the rest of the session. On the other side of things, Verstappen would top the timesheets, with a big shock being Alex Albon slotting his Williams into third. And since we now know that session means all, let's see what second practice has in store. Not much, as it turned out. McLaren would top the timesheets, Norris ahead of Piastri, the Aussie needing to check the floor and what's left of his entrails after this moment on his quick lap. Sergio Perez was even slower in second practice, showing his team he had other uses, such as observing the characteristics of the other cars when they came flying past him. At least Alpine were able to punish Ocon again, sending him out in what turned out to be a much better session. P7 come the flag at the end of Friday. Speaking of Le Sacre Bleu, overnight we got to witness the opening of the Olympic Games in France, which, if I'm honest, looked more like an extended trailer for the new Assassin's Creed game, and proves why we shouldn't trust the French with f***ing anything. FP3 on Saturday morning wouldn't end up a whole lot better, with rain streaming down upon the Ardennes forest, making their spectators about as wet as Kelly Piquet when she hears Daniel Ricciardo was complaining of heavy steering, and I wonder how that came about. Meanwhile, the Aston Martin drivers were warned pre-session not to take any risks, as they've been running tight to their crash damage budget, and never mind, Stroll's gone into the wall. The Canadian lost the rear into Eau Rouge, only to 360 no-scope the barrier on the inside of Raidillon. That brought out the red flag, and and after that, the remaining 19 drivers were too scared to grace the track again. The FIA later threw out a second red flag, if that's quite enough, And it looked as if that would be it for our Saturday morning action. Not quite, however, as the circuit would go back to green with a grand total of 2 minutes remaining on the clock. Enough time for the drivers to learn valuable lessons about the track conditions. For example, if you break there, Carlos, you're heading straight for the wall. With Nikita Mazepin being spotted during the stoppage period, we got set up for qualifying, which was set to be in equally damp conditions. Q1 looked to see the track dry up, for everyone apart from McLaren apparently, whose spotter outside of the circuit must have placed himself under a f***ing waterfall or something. Despite that, there were no big shocks in the first session, unless you want to count Sergio Perez not wedging his Red Bull halfway into a wall. Lando Norris and Lewis Hamilton did put themselves at risk by being particularly mid, though ended up surviving into Q2. That started in the same way as the first, McLaren predicting more invisible rain, except this time they weren't lying. That caught out a few, Albon, Ricciardo and Stroll all ending up in the bottom 5, though for a few of them that could be a pace issue, who knows. King of having no pace, Sergio Perez almost slipped out himself, but squeezed through in 10th. Unfortunately for him, he'd now ran out of fresh intermediate tyres for Q3, which I guess happens when you haven't been there in a while. Or maybe Red Bull were just expecting him to stack it at some point. Now, it's been a while since we've seen Ferrari wheel out its strategists who were dropped on the floor as a child, but they decided that leaving their fresh set of intermediates till the track got worse was a good idea. That left the battle between Red Bull, McLaren and Mercedes, Sergio Perez doing a surprisingly good job to put his car on provisional pole when you factor in Verstappen's penalty. With no one else improving, it looked as if it might just stay that way, until Charles Leclerc came out of the literal shadow realm and stuck his Ferrari on pole. Do I feel bad about slacking off their strategists a few seconds ago? Well, not really, but fair play to the Monegasque. Sunny skies would greet the drivers for Sunday as Sergio Perez lined up and prepared to get past Charles Leclerc into turn 1. Since this was Sergio Perez, however, he ended up losing a spot to Hamilton and defending from Piastri in the opening stages. Meanwhile, in the land of fairy tale strategies at RB, Daniel Ricciardo was on soft tyres and still lost places off the start. Bear with me, I'm just off to kill myself. Leclerc had held the lead, but the Mercs were showing great race pace. Lap 3 saw the Ferrari driver lose the lead to his teammate for 2025. The comment section of this video loved that one. While the Briton was rapid, Slow was living up to his name, trundling around the circuit, though instead of bringing out a much-needed safety car, fixed the issue and carried on his way. That's just f***ing boring, isn't it? Not for Lewis Hamilton, however. He seemed quite excited at the prospect of leading a Grand Prix. Maybe a little bit too excited. Lap 12 saw the leaders pit, Verstappen doing so in tandem but ending up stuck behind Yuki Tsunoda, who showed Red Bull just how great his defending was. Probably the wrong car to do it against though. Oscar Piastri was the big winner of those early stops, flying back past Russell then overtaking Perez, who looks more and more with every lap like he's celebrating his retirement party. Carlos Sainz meanwhile opted to stay out and try something different on strategy, which went well. Checo's day wasn't getting much better. He had now been passed by George Russell and his teammate in his rearview mirrors. Red Bull decided trying to tell the Mexican to move aside was too dangerous, instead felt it safer just to pit him away from the Dutchman. Checo then started to complain about being slow on the straights, but I'm pretty sure that's just a him problem. At this stage, Hamilton and Leclerc had made their final pit stops, Ferrari's last hopes of victory lying with Carlos Sainz driving a Ferrari wider than Kelly Piquet's. Oscar Piastri also looked competitive, showing that he'd attended the Lance Stroll school of pit stop f***ups. It didn't hold him back, however, and soon enough, the Aussie was past Leclerc at the chicane. George Russell had decided to stick this one out on a one-stop but had now inherited the lead. That left us with a straight fight between the pair of Mercedes, with Oscar Piastri waiting in the wings if the Silver Arrows decided to go all 2014 again. It looked as if Hamilton had the tyres to take George by ease, but the 63 car had gently caressed his Pirellis all race long, and despite some heavy pressure in the final laps, George Russell came across the line to take his third Grand Prix win. That was not what we expected coming into this one. If you ask me, this was one of those races which we label as, quote, strategic in order to avoid the fact it was just a bit Except in this instance, everything worked out and we actually got a stunning Grand Prix. Sergio Perez ended up finishing in P8, so it was nice knowing you, Checo, and at least my video from earlier today looks like it might just age well. If you enjoyed this one, go and give that a watch as well. Just before you do that, I'd appreciate if you gave this video a like and got subscribed if you're new. We're on the final approach to 150k now, so a big thank you to all the support in these last few weeks. Cheers as well to all my patrons and channel members who get early access and previews to these videos. If you want to get involved in that, then head over to the links in the description down below. Anyway, I'll be back with another video soon, but until then, have a good one.